Let's talk. Whose land are you on? What to know about the indigenous land back movement? I'm here today as a guest on land that was stolen from the Cheyenne and Rapanui nations. Land that many other tribal nations set up as home before those relationships were written over by settler colonialism. So land acknowledgements like this have become pretty commonplace at the beginning of events at university, sometimes in our email signatures. But I always found that's kind of confusing. Like, once you admit something is stolen, aren't you supposed to give it back? So if there's anyone listening who has couple hundred spare acres that are feeling guilty about it, just contact your local tribal governments. We would be happy to release you of the burden. That's probably not you, right? Maybe you've heard of these movements to return land to indigenous people, but you're thinking, I can barely afford rent. What is it I'm supposed to be giving back? That's what I want to clarify today. Because not only is getting land back in indigenous hands in your best interests and best interests of land itself, there's reason why I can help make it happen. I'm a descendant of the true Mount Band of Chippewa Indians, which is part of the indigenous nation of Great Lakes region. Home for me is also the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in California and Palm Territory, and now I'm professor of Indigenous Study at CSU. My ancestors worked very hard to navigate a complex and changing world that was ravaged by settler colonialism. My grandma and both of her parents survived the trauma and abuse of Indian boarding school system. The generation before them fight to keep our tribe from being intimidated by federal government. Going even further back, my six-time great-grandfather's signature is on the 1863 Treaty of Old Crossing, which forced the Anash natives to give up 11 million acres of what's now Minnesota in exchange for a little over $400,000 and 640 acres reservation. That works out to about 5 cents acre, which have to be one of the worst land deals in U.S. history. Or maybe the best, depending on who you ask. This sort of thing happens all over the US and Canada. The problem is just that settlers showed up and took the land. It's how the treaty is ever sent. That land we lost in Minnesota, the Enbridge's Land 3 pipeline goes right through the middle of it. That freaking pipeline is responsible for the largest aniline oil spill ever recorded in US. And now they are trying to expand it. Whether we're talking about pipelines or some of industry, the colonial mindset has been about extracting resources, mostly with the goal of making the rich richer. But that's why land back is not about indigenous people trying to run a real estate scam. We're doing this because the land itself is in crisis. Every indigenous culture is unique, but our shared philosophy is that we come from the land and the land is what sustains us, and therefore we have a responsibility to care for it. Land back is about reassuring indigenous relationship. with the land. Relationships that are based on tens of thousands of years of hands-on experience taking care of our homelands. If you ever tried to hand and farming or gardening, you know that land management takes more than just showing up the good intentions. Globally, indigenous people are really good at managing for biodiversity and resilient ecosystems. That's because we've had generation upon generation to test out what works and what doesn't. There's tons of evidence examples to back this up. One recent study shows that indigenous people make up just 5% of the global population, but we're managing nearly half the area on Earth that are protected for conservation or still support intact ecosystems. In the United States, tribal nations have reintroduced indigenous species even when the government say it would work. So in the Northwest, when I grew up, most of the big river has been dammed, which makes it super hard for salmon to survive, and many wrens have gone extinct. So back in 90s, the Nimipu people told the state of Ado, hey, you'd like to bring Koba salmon back to the Snake River. The state's official guys were like, I don't think so. But the tribe did it anyway. They got eggs that one of the hatcheries gonna to throw away, incubated them, and basically snuck the fish back into the river. And now they're doing so well the state has reopened the sport fishery, and the tribe is reintroducing kobe to a bunch of other rivers. Same thing with buffalo. Back in 1800s when the railroads were going in and native people are literally being cut off the land at gunpoint, buffalo were nearly exterminated because their thoughts are making it easier to subdue the tribes who depends on them. So get this. Most of buffalo they use today in zoos or welfare reservoirs are actually descendants from conservation herds the native people protected back then. And now, the Blackfeet Nation are bringing free-range buffalo back to their homelands in Montana. We're also pretty good at cleaning up the ecological messes caused by colonialism. The town of Eureka, California was like, okay, we're ready to get some land back. I know it's culturally really important place to you. By the way, it's a super fun site, so it's highly polluted. Good luck with it. And while you try to say great, we'll take it. And now they are in the process of successfully remediating site. They remove the tundra trash and contaminated soil. They are working on a erosion control and wildlife habitat and making a place where they can hold ceremonies again. The land is better off in indigenous hands because we treat the land like it's relative. Even you're used to harvest work, so run a summer camp for native kids. We're talking about indigenous saying and how we relate to land. So last summer, after camp wraps up, Henry's mom calls me. He's one of the campers, he's 6. And she says he's having a falling out with the best friend. They are playing outside. Their friend, who's not native, was squeezing grasshoppers for fun. Henry tried to stop him, and the friend said, they're just bugs. It doesn't matter. But Henry told him, they're not just bugs. They are our relatives and you can't kill them. So that was the summer I had to learn how to keep grasshopper from eating my garden with garlic spray because every time I want to use pesticide or something that's killed them, I thought of Hallie. And what kind of future we might have is if we actually lived like that. The land back is about radically rethinking how we relate to the land and other living things. So, Look at those lands you are on. Some tribes, like the Alani and Duwamish, have a way for you to pay volunteer land tax on their website as a way to recognize your guests on their homeland, way easier than dealing with the IRS. Or maybe you don't own land, but you need to live there for now. You can set up a bequest in your will so your estate goes back to trip. I'm not saying that any of this is easy. Unsettling is harder work, especially in places where indigenous people are removed or erased. That absence tends to be papered over with the myth that colonialism work, Native people disappeared, so there's nothing to worry about. But when I look at my own family's history, the governments that took our land and later our ceremonies, the boarding schools that took our language, the epidemic of sexual violence that has touched nearly every Native woman in my family. All of these concerning efforts to end the story of our as people, and despite of that, we are still here. Our survival as indigenous people is a miracle. And the point of miracle is that despite action. I think we are honest as human beings. We know that this path we are on is both morally untenable and ecologically unsustainable. Land back is a call to action to get real that the current system is only working for an increasingly smaller group of folks. But when the people who are benefiting from this legacy of stolen land stop forward, real change can happen. This isn't just opportunity to right a past injustice. It's the only way to heal the land itself. And that means a better future for everyone. Thank you.